You're watching News 24 Live. The 2015 Cricket World Cup is now down to the final 8, and the Proteas kick off the first quarterfinal. They play Sri Lanka. I'm joined in studio by Sport 24's Garen Namley and Rob Howing to have a brief look ahead at those quarterfinal fixtures. Gents, thanks very much for coming in this morning.
How are you doing,
Nick?
Garen, nervous times for Proteas fans. As we know, the knockout games is where we don't have the best track record. Yeah, how are you feeling personally about our fixture on Wednesday?
Personally, I'm feeling a little bit nervous, Nick. As you say, we've got a pretty awful knockout record. I don't think we've won a game. Is that correct? Never won a game.
0% record.
So this would be a first. And you know, Sri Lanka's the sort of team that you can see South Africa losing to, especially if they bat first, and we have to actually then chase. You know, with Malinga in their lineup and a couple of spinners, they all seem to be able to turn their arm over. We haven't got a great record chasing. I'd feel far happier if we win the toss and elect to bat, which I'm pretty sure AB de Villiers will elect to do. But you know, that means that the toss could well decide this game. So a little bit nervous. You know, we qualified second in our group, so we were going to play number 3 in any case. Looking at their group, you know, Australia and New Zealand seem to be the Form 2 teams in that group. So we thought it would be Sri Lanka, maybe England, who eventually missed out. So Sri Lanka or England was going to be our best bet. Probably England we would have preferred, but we finished second, so we had to play Sri Lanka. We can't do much about that now. They've got Kumar Sangakkara in red-hot form, 4 centuries. I'm pretty sure he can't continue in that rich vein, but that's not to say he's not going to score an 80 or a 90. So we're going to have a work cut out for us. A little bit nervous, like I said, first quarterfinal up. You know, if we do get through, we're going to play the winner of the New Zealand West Indies game, which again will be a tough game. But let us just get through this first match first, and then we'll worry about the semi-finals after that.
Rob, before I talk to you about the possible lineup for Wednesday, let's just talk about the formats. In the past, we've had the Super Sixes. We've got more sort of minnow nations in the World Cup now, and a lot of them have punched above their weight, but you know, don't really stand a chance against what we now have as the final 8. Who people more or less expected to be there. What do you make of the format?
You know, there has been talk of them in the future still trying to cull the tournament a little bit more. There is this belief that most major world sports events shouldn't take much more than a month, ideally. So, you know, the World Cup does drag on. It kind of almost sort of exceeds that timeline a bit, which is not ideal. You want to sort of, you know, from a television entertainment point of view, etc., you want to keep people interested. And sometimes less is more, as we know, in terms of keeping public interest alive. Having said that, there's a bit of a quandary now facing the ICC, because as much as they've been talking about still cutting it back a little bit further and maybe giving the minnows more of an opportunity to sort of show what they're worth in sort of T20 level, for instance, I think that the vast majority of the minnows have done well enough to justify a sort of a repeat dose you know, next time. So I'd be quite surprised if they do tamper with the format. It hasn't sort of dragged on as much to me as, for instance, the 2007 World Cup, which in the Caribbean was, especially for those who were there apparently, people found it a really long, tedious, trying sort of tournament. This one has had a little bit more sort of, it's just, I think, it's kept people sort of glued to the tournament a little bit better. And the minnows haven't disgraced. We haven't seen some absolutely appalling scoreboards from some of the minnow nations. So I suspect that maybe the status quo is going to remain for at least the next World Cup.
Speaking of some of those minnow nations that have done reasonably well, Ireland in particular, I think I remember last World Cup they were also quite impressive. Do you think that the ICC will finally grant them test status? Are they there yet?
I wonder. You know, that's a tricky one, because they always say the longer the format, the more the sort of the weaker nation is going to struggle. The one thing that's not helping is that, of course, you've still got sort of a Zimbabwe issue lurking there. Zimbabwe don't get to play a hell of a lot of Test cricket, and so you know, there's the question of trying to sort of raise them up to a level where they could consistently get back into sort of playing tests against all the nations, really. I think the last thing you want to do is burden Test cricket with too many countries, because as it is, Test cricket, as we know, is being pushed more and more brutally to the margins, and people need to see, I think, strength versus strength in Test cricket, because it gets pushed into such sort of small pockets, really, which is a little bit cruel for followers of the 5-day game, which many people still believe is the best. So that one may just sort of bubble and boil for a little bit longer without there being any sort of decision. But obviously, in an ideal world, you would like to think that a team like Ireland could become competitive in Test cricket, and it would be a tremendous fillip for cricket as a whole in Ireland if Test status was granted, obviously.